Yeah. Hello and welcome everyone to Meshery's development meeting. Today is October 26th. And before we begin, I'll share the meeting minutes in chat so you all can write your name in the attendees list. And we do follow a tradition to welcome newcomers on every call. So if you are joining this call for the first time, feel free to unmute yourself and give a quick introduction. I see a couple of newcomers on the call. So Sufyaan, is this your first time joining this Meshery dev call? Would like to give an introduction?
This is not my first time. I have been here before also, but I'm not very regular.
Oh, okay.
So should I give my introduction?
Yeah, you can.
Basically, I'm a student pursuing my engineering in Bangalore, and I've recently joined Meshery, and I'm working on Meshery CTL on some issue. So today, Lee had asked me to just present whatever I have done in the issue. So I'll be looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Sufyaan. So if I miss any of any of the more newcomers, feel free to unmute yourself and give a quick introduction before we begin. So let's start with first agenda items. So today we also have KubeCon 2022 for Meshery project office hours. So for that, you all can get RSVP from here. Let me share the link in chat. So I do encourage everyone to join us for the Meshery's project office hours. And if you do join, do get yourself a Zoom background, which represents Layer 5 as a community. So you can also get the Layer 5 community backgrounds from the Layer 5 community drive. With that, let's start with our first agenda item. So do we have Nithish on the call?
No, he just messaged that he's held up today. So yeah, let me speak to that real fast on Nitish's behalf, just being familiar with his work. So everybody, there are, I'm not sure what that link goes to, but we may as well click it. So Nithish Karthik has been working on a collection of custom resources, a collection of components. So this is, one of the ways that Meshery manages infrastructure is by, digesting and comprehending Kubernetes custom resource definitions and creating components out of them. And so the project has been doing this programmatically for 10 different service meshes for a while now. And in this upcoming release, v0.7, man, I can't wait till we get to a 1.0, by the way, but v0.7, we're taking that same approach and doing it, which is generating components for Meshery to manage. We're doing it programmatically across about 500 different apps, I guess is the way of saying it, 500 different Kubernetes workloads. And then for each of those 500, there are, on average, maybe 5 individual components. So 5 times 5, carry the 1. Anyway, there's going to be a lot of components. And so what Nithish Karthik is working on is just the pre-processing of the components of component generation, which is to say, when a user runs Meshery, it should be cognizant of and ready to manage any number of pre-existing, like pre-released software. So just randomly, there's Argo. I'm sitting here, there's a couple of Argo entries here. So Meshery will be capable of configuring Argo and doing so out of the box. And so that's the effort that Nithish is doing. There's a number of other people that are involved in the component generation and actually representing those on the Meshery.io website as well. And so, yeah, questions or comments about that or the approach? Why? So we want to make sure that as Meshery goes to interface with, have all these integrations and interface with these other systems, that it's ready to do so as soon as someone downloads Meshery. That's kind of one goal. Another one is that it could manage not just the current version of Argo as the example, but also the prior version of Argo CD and the prior version to that and the prior version to that. Kind of, there becomes this fairly complex compatibility matrix between Meshery managing an individual application like Spinnaker and how that what particular version of Kubernetes, in this case, Spinnaker would require. So there's there's some sophistication or some complexity rather inside of that type of maintaining that type of compatibility. And so we're trying to do it as programmatically as possible, which is what this effort is about. And so turns out that there's a portion of the engineering that happens for Meshery that happens in spreadsheets. So we may have to, we may not want to talk about that publicly. That's a little, that could be embarrassing, but it works really well. And of course, I'm just being sarcastic. I'm just kidding that that actually works very well because these components will be used for Meshery server to manage, to publish on the Meshery.io website, the layer5.io website, as well as inside of MeshMap, one of the plugins. So it's great that these are just being automatically or programmatically handled. We do a lot of this type of processing, pre-processing in GitHub workflows. And so some of the work here is being done in that way. Meshery in that workflow will reach out to Artifact Hub. So in a very real way, it grabs all 10,000 Helm charts and digests them, crunches through them, pulls out components, generates components, pulls them out, and then makes them manageable by Meshery. Boy, we should go tell that story somewhere. That sounds impressive. So that's in flight. Good questions, comments? Cool.
Yeah, thank you, Lee, for giving an overview of this. Next up is Ashish. Ashish, you're ready with your update?
Yeah, yeah. Just a second. I'm having cold, so if at any point my voice is incomprehensible or inaudible, just let me know. Okay. Okay. So we are migrating to Postgres. We were using SQLite up until this point, so there are a bunch of considerations that are to be made. There is an open PR. I'll provide the link to the PR there. And so recently, a liveness probe is added to the Kubernetes deployment. So we have Kubernetes deployment, Docker Compose deployments, and you can deploy it locally. So for Kubernetes, there was a liveness probe added for the database, so that if database crashes, then it can be restarted. This is a TCP-based liveness probe. So basically, we will try to check if Postgres is there using the TCP probe. And we don't need a separate Helm chart for our database. The database is currently, the way this current model works is, by current I mean the one in the open pull request, is we have made the database pluggable, so you can plug your own database if you want. Before this, we were using embedded database at the SQLite, so you had not that level of control over the connection of your database, life cycle of your database connection, and now you can. But in-house, basically, from our own Helm charts, from our own manifest, we package this lightweight Postgres container so that you can just directly use it. Other than that, this API endpoint is added /API/system/database to manage the lifecycle so that you can create new connections, delete the older ones, etc. And so we would also need this to reflect in the UI after the PR is merged. And then there will be a call for action for people who want to contribute to Golang in MeshCTL. So CLI contributions are the easiest. So we would need MeshCTL system database as well as this check to be there in the MeshCTL system check. When we do the pre-flight checks, we would want to check if the database is present or and this would need to be added in the config.yaml. So there is a bunch of considerations around MeshCTL. So if you're a CLI contributor, this will be kind of a legend issue. I'll create subtasks in it. So if you want to get assigned some of these things, then you can. Right off the bat, I can start using it. And I already have a running. So this is this is currently, I am connected to a Postgres instance, which is running inside my container here. And as you can see, I have all the tables, all the basically these are all the tables that Meshery uses, the applications, filters, etc. So I have all my Kubernetes objects. These objects are also the objects that you're seeing here. I have my applications. I have my okay. So yeah, I deleted the designs while I was testing things. So I'll just demo with the application. So yeah, there are a bunch of duplicates here because I'm connected to the same database instance, and I'm seeding again and again when the Meshery server instance starts. So it has seeded these components in the Postgres instance. Now, if you want to know the status of or what instance you're connected to, if you go here, you can see a few things like this logger field can be removed. Like users can get stuff like what's the they're using Postgres or some other engine, and what's the address of the database, etc., etc. And if you do a post operation which has this body, you can change stuff like username, you can change host, all that on runtime, you can change port. In this case, I to save time and not do curl and all, what I did was when I made this request, this actually went and changed the port. So if I'll reload, I'll see that the port is 5433 now, and this port is basically now pointing to this database and the other one. And if I'll look at here, I'll see an empty database here because this was connected later on. Okay, this is yeah. Actually, my message actually updated when I switched the database. As you can see, the new objects were added to the new instance. Yeah, so there are a few bugs here and there in this implementation. There are a few error logs you might see here. These like actually the objects are being added, but still the database is closed. This error is coming. I know where this is coming from. So basically, a few cleanups are required here. And yeah, other than that, this PR, as you can see now in my new instance, I have all the data. My MeshSync has pumped the data into my new instance. So both my Postgres instance are hydrated with the with the data. And if I come, but it only, this hydration only happens for your Kubernetes. So these objects are Kubernetes objects. So when you connect to a new database instance, will dynamically get all the data from your cluster and also hydrate your new database. Although if I'll go in application, I'll see no applications found, even though I had like 4 here because this is a new instance. Right now, there is no logic that when you connect to a new instance, we already also seed the new data there. So maybe that can be added. Maybe that's no big deal. But anyway, so you can have different database instances with different content and all. And yeah, that's just example of the flexibility that we can achieve. One of the reasons for this migration to Postgres was to have like, as the name of the doc suggests, workflow engine. So as we move towards a workflow engine like temporal, it would require its own it would require a connection to a database, and that database is mandated as Postgres. So we will make use of the same database, and in Meshery cloud that we have, we also use the same database. So in cases of on-prem deployments, we can like reuse the same Postgres instance for all the Meshery stuff and all the Meshery cloud stuff. And so there are a bunch of utilities for this approach. And yeah, that's kind of it in this particular task so far. The other tasks are down below, so I'll come after the guys. Does anyone has any questions regarding this migration, or like anything that I've said so far?
The API changes are done, right?
These changes.
The put, post, and get, all these changes are done, or like if any
These
help
are
is
on my
required,
PR.
then I can work. Okay, fine.
These are on PR, yeah. On the back end, actually, these changes are done. I mean, on my PR, but on Meshery CTL, we would need to consume these. So that is what I was talking about in here when I said that in Meshery CTL commands like system database will have something like Meshery CTL system database, switch, connect, or status, something like what's the status of current database, and those commands would be essentially performing CRUD operations on this API. So
Okay.
yeah, the help required would be after this PR gets merged and in the UI and Meshery CTL.
Okay, yeah, then I'll look forward to work on that PR then, on that issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
So yeah, thank you, Ashish. So anyone has more comments or feedback for Ashish?
Just a quick question, Ashish. You had, I didn't catch it all, but you had switched out maybe the database on the fly, and I didn't know if that was like taking the same type of database, like Postgres, and dumping it and kind of restarting, or was that like actively switching from one type to the next?
Actively switching to one type next. So you can literally go from SQLite to Postgres on the fly.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That's quite versatile. That's nice.
Ashish, maybe this will be a deep question, but how did you do this? I mean, if you can go deep.
Actually, I didn't do anything. Everything is done by GOM. So all the credit goes to GOM. So GOM is an ORM library that we use here, and it lets us switch the underlying engine that we use. So either whether it's SQLite engine or Postgres engine. So whenever we switch the database, all I do is just I create a new database instance. So we have only one global instance at a time. So I acquire a lock on that instance, and I create this new instance for whatever this new JSON. So there you saw the field type. So if you on the runtime, if you'll say not Postgres but SQLite, I'll create a new database instance pointing to that SQLite file and all, and assign that to the global instance. So and how it basically creates like the whole internals is managed by, most of it is managed by GOM. If you're interested, you can look at you can go in Meshkit, and there is the code there which interfaces with both the Postgres and SQLite stuff. But that interface is like very thin shim. Most of the code is in GOM, so we don't have to take care of any of this. That's why this migration was like very straightforward.
Thank you.
Thank you all. So next up we have Harkirat on rjsf field error template. So Harkirat would like to present.
Yeah, definitely. So actually, we have moved to like rjsf v5 currently, like past week. So some of the changes were underlying. So I added some changes to the template. So earlier we were using the field template. So I added the field error template to control the errors. That's what I did. And the next item is like the behavior of JSON schema with the $ID. So actually I can demonstrate Ashish what it was. So actually, so you see this like this is the validation error. So the replica set. So whenever it's like the retrieval URI and the base URI is the Meshery dot layer 5 dot maybe definition workload application. So whenever I add this, so all the validation are suppressed. It's for all the global thing JSON schema that are using the that are all like everyone using this JSON schema with the $ID stuff. So
This
like
$ID
you
is
see,
added at front end, right?
yeah, I know
Abhishek?
it's I think it's at the back end, like with the every adapters we have the $ID stuff. So you see, like we have the profile to be required. So it's not throwing a red error or the red border. So it's due to the $ID. And I was just thinking we can quite remove it. That's the solution.
Can you show me an example JSON of what field you're referring to? If you just go to slash, if you already have that component, you can go to slash API slash om slash workload or slash API slash components.
It's like maybe API om, and it's like workload.
Yeah.
So okay.
Actually, this endpoint has to be deprecated. So don't add anything. Just
actually, so actually you can see that I will send you the JSON schema. You can actually try and
go to that link sent to you. I mean, I just sent a link in the chat, so you can go there and sure.
Okay, I got it. So I'm not using the prettify stuff.
Anyways,
so it's here, I guess. So it's here, like you can see. So it's the base URL, and I was like thinking around the reading the JSON schema doc. So what they have is like it's like the current retrieval URI, this thing is like being validated against the base URI stuff. So that's why it suppressed most of the errors. Like I can send you the link if you can see. So it's with all the underlying components with the $ID. Any question, Lee and Ashish?
Yeah, actually, I'll look into it because as we move to the new component mesh model components, I don't know how much of this thing would be. So I'll tell you on Slack if this is worth putting efforts in or whatever.
Okay. So what I can do is like I can just remove the $ID. So most of the underlying component wouldn't be affected by it.
I mean, we can get on the call later after it and discuss.
Okay, sure. Okay, bye.
Thank you, Harkirat. So next up we have Uzair on fixed search in deployment model and one more update. So Uzair would like to present.
So the first item is like that Pranav pointed out, like when the deployment model was having bug, like if you went to search, it was not working. Like this is the issue. The search went out of scope after the first keystroke. So the fix was this bug was introduced due to one of the this was due to a regression issue introduced in this PR. Basically, we were managing the state incorrectly. So this was the first item, and the second item is detection of type of Meshery deployment. So when Meshery is deployed using Meshery CTL system start, the Meshery container and all the things are deployed inside a cluster, and in that we don't have access to context to any of the users context like user kube config. So we generate the kube config, and we give the name as context name as in cluster, and then up till this point we know that the deployment is in cluster, but later on we lose the information that whether the deployment is in cluster or out cluster. So basically I introduced a new field in the K8s context struct, and then we are persisting the type of deployment in that context in that struct. So yes, this is how we are maintaining the type of deployment. And there is a dependent PR in Meshery Cloud as well, which updates the K8s context table schema. So yes, this was my two items. This one items. Yes, and anyone have some good name or consideration of what should be the name of the context which is deployed inside a cluster. Like we currently give name as in cluster, and in the settings page, if you will see, you will have in cluster and type of deployment also in cluster. Ashish, you were mentioning you giving some unique name like something.
Yeah, I'm out of ideas for now. I'll have to think about it, because we are creating the context here ourselves, so I don't think it should be a random name or something, but what attribute to use, like maybe something we can query in the kube system, a namespace. But again, there's a bunch of considerations around here, but for now, I think we should get this PR merged. So
yeah, and the question that you're asking, Uzair, is about aesthetics, right? It's about the terms in cluster or out of cluster. Is that right? Or are you asking about how to universally and confidently identify whether you're in or out of cluster? It's the former, right? It's just aesthetics. Yeah. And so yeah, so there's really nothing to investigate, Ashish. It's just, do you have a better name other than in cluster or out of cluster?
no, actually, there's deployment name as well as deployment type. So on line number 265, you can say that's the context name that we're providing as in cluster. And here below is just the type. So of course, type has to be in cluster, out of cluster. That was the aesthetic part. The logic part was here, what to name the context, because what's going to happen is we'll have two columns, both of which will say in cluster and in cluster side by side. So do we have a better name for the context itself? And for that, I said that I can't. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's good clarification. But we're not renaming the context name.
When we are in cluster, there is no context because we are in cluster. So we create that kube config and we create that context, and then we point it to a kube API server. So we are in position to name that thing, whatever we want.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah. Then I don't know that it should be anything different other than verbatim, the exact in underscore cluster instead of hyphen. Like we're not, there actually you have it hyphenated here, which unless someone can come up with something aesthetically better.
You can use in context cluster. I mean, that sounds okay. This is related to context.
Yep, I got it. Yep. In context cluster. That confuses. That is it. Thank you so much for saying something, for coming up with like brainstorming an idea. Keep the ideas coming. What else? Those two terms are so darn close to each other, they get confused so much. I think putting them together is, so you have an in context cluster. Your context is in cluster. No. My context is defined out of cluster. It's a combination of credentials and a pointer to where my cluster is. That's what a context is. Anyway, what else, Zora? It's Husseina, any terms that you've heard floating around? Okay, I'm gonna deploy this application in cluster B. So like in cluster is kind of part of the sentence. I'm gonna do this in cluster. I'll do it in this namespace. I'm gonna run this locally on my machine. I'm gonna do that outside of the cluster. Those terms seem fairly comprehensible.
Or if it is not related to inbound or outbound, then you can just use cluster context.
Yep. I think we're speaking past each other. Yeah, you're right. It has nothing to do with inbound or outbound.
Then cluster context is fine.
Okay. Nice.
Okay.
Thank you, Uzair. So next up we have is Sufyaan. So Sufyaan would like to present on your bits.
Yes. So I'm just going to say what changes I've made. Like I have made changes to 5 files. I was working on this issue 6273. It was related to Meshery exp filter. Basically, the command was not working because the API endpoint had changed or it was depreciated. So I just changed the endpoint and I added some error handling. That's all.
Sorry to interrupt you, Sufyan. So, like, your screen is black. Is it for everyone else also?
Yeah.
Uh, I have shared it, but I don't know why.
Yeah, you can reshare your screen or maybe the full screen.
I had done full screen only. Okay, I'll just scale. Can you see it now?
Yep, it's fine.
Yeah, so basically I have made changes to these 5 files here, and the the issue that I was working was Meshery CTL exp filter. This command was not working, so I checked through the web interface, and it it seems like the API endpoint has been depreciated. So I changed only the API endpoint and I added some error handling that was mentioned in the issue. That's all. Nothing else.
Yes, look, to me, it's looking pretty great. Do you happen to know if that one of the errors, the responses, it says that it's an invalid GitHub URL, and
Yes.
do you know, are we really limiting it to just GitHub? I know that we were.
No, it is for when you have entered a GitHub URL and within that it is not working. I guess it is like that when I last checked.
Okay. Yeah. 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 It seems arbitrary that we've limited it to GitHub, but yeah. Good. Well, so Sufyaan, it's great to, I mean, this is much needed. Obviously, we've got the wrong pointers. We've since promoted support for WASM filters out of experimental, but we've neglected to update the references here. So that's helpful. One other thing that is encouraging about the work that you're doing here is, well, one, there's much more of it needed. Hussein can talk to you about that. But two, there's this errors new, this function that you're using is absolutely the right function. And it's one that it ends up accepting a few parameters, it ends up accepting a lot of information about this. Like it'll have a short description, a long description. It can carry up.
So in the errors.go, there are some errors that are using the Meshery. What do we call it?
Meshkit errors, yeah.
Yeah, Meshkit errors, but they do not print well if you're not giving it the Meshery the long description. So I don't know why they were not working. So
Yeah.
I just added the long description, the same as the short description, and they started working.
Yeah, sounds lazy to me. Because there's supposed to be two different things. Yeah, there's. I popped a link into the Zoom chat. It's the error codes reference for.
So when it is returned from here, I don't know how to use the object properly here. I tried using the dot operator, but it didn't seem to work.
I don't know if anybody else has feedback on that, but the feedback that I would have is on the empty strings in some of the error responses. So there's a couple of them.
I didn't do anything here. I just changed the.
Yeah, no. This is that's great. This is an opportunity to potentially improve them. So since you're kind of spending time in here and looking at a couple of things anyway, see those empty strings on the end as parameters on the end of your function. Yeah, they those things end up getting published out on Meshery.io or docs.meshery.io. So I'm just sharing this screen. So Antoinette Caldwell, she's sick this morning, but is normally on this call. She's been going around trying to get a lot of these filled in. So the error codes that you're working with in Meshery CTL, they will be automatically published to this documentation page. And so the empty strings that are there that are not filled in, they'll show like this. It'll be a short description, and maybe the same thing for the long description, which is not helpful. And then if nothing in the other strings, it won't say, well, probably what caused this is the fact that there was a malformed Kubernetes manifest for your Istio, whatever the probable cause was. And here's how you should probably fix that. Some of that you won't know, and that's okay. But to the extent that you're in there and it kind of makes sense, it's like, invalid GitHub URL. Well, probable cause could be you're not connected to the internet, or you misspelled something, or you're trying to connect to a private group, not a public one. Suggested remediation. Check your internet connection. Verify what I'm saying? And so stuff like that is just super helpful.
Do you want me to make new error codes or?
Sure, or fill in if there's any empty strings, fill them in if you can.
Yeah, okay.
The empty strings relate to, like, one of them is for probable cause. The other one is for suggested remediation. The other one is long description. So yeah.
And there is also this UI problem when you post a filter, like when you have loaded the filters, they do not refresh into the home page, the filter page. Like,
sounds like a GraphQL. Sounds like we don't have a GraphQL subscription on that page. Gaurav, do you know about that by chance? So the filters page, I think in the UI, he's saying if you're in Meshery UI, is it if you're in Meshery UI and you do the upload, or if you're doing the upload through Meshery?
Either way.
Okay.
I tried both and it doesn't reload, or I don't know what happens.
Do you if you refresh the screen, do you see your new entry though?
Yes. When we refresh the screen, then it happens. Whether on the page.
Yeah. So do you mind capturing that in a GitHub issue? Because there's a fix for that. And it has to do with the GraphQL subscription on the page, or a lack of a subscription. You don't have to fix it if it's not an area of comfort, but just if you're comfortable just opening up a bug about it, that would be helpful.
I don't know much about it, so I've never opened an issue.
No worries. I'll test it out once and file an issue if I found an error.
And the deploys are not working. Like, this filters are very new. I tried to search about it, but I didn't find much information about it. And I was just using the URLs that were provided in the examples for checking if the thing is working or not.
Yeah, you're right. There's more description needed about that, because they wouldn't work just by themselves. And so,
Yeah.
I think you're trying to do the right thing. We need more docs around what it's supposed to do. It's a great, nice update. And A for effort on Meshery CTL and like a bonus points for taking on maybe some error codes. I would say kind of a C- for like picking up the request to file a GitHub issue. I encourage you to get really comfortable with filing issues. Like, it'll help you engage in the project. Awesome. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for presenting.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
So yeah, moving next, we have Pranav on work in progress for deleting MeshSync on deleting Kubernetes context. So Pranav would like to share.
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen. Hopefully my screen is visible. So, so there was a recent ask about when we delete a Kubernetes context, then it should delete the meshing data related to it. So first, let me tell you what's the background information about it. So when we deploy Meshery, whether inside a container or outside a container, Meshery automatically detects your running Kubernetes cluster through your default kube config. And as soon as it does that, it deploys this custom controller like Meshery operator, MeshSync, and Meshery broker. So MeshSync is actually responsible for determining different workloads in your running Kubernetes environment. As soon as it does that, then it sends that to Meshery server, and Meshery server stores them into your local database, which Ashish was just discussing. So one thing to note that as soon as we delete a Kubernetes context, then Meshery wasn't deleting the meshing data related to that. So this was the ask about deleting the data as soon as the context is deleted. So I was just working on this. I've almost reached to the end. A couple of things are left based on the reviews which I've got. So I'll just show what I've done so far. It's just a new function which gets triggered as soon as we delete a context. Then what it does is that it looks for, it checks the context and checks for which Kubernetes cluster it points to. And if there's just one Kubernetes cluster to which it is pointing, then it fetches all the data, and then it checks that cluster ID, and then it deletes all the data related to that cluster ID. And I already did that, but I got a little more reviews about enhancing the messaging framework based on that. So I did that as well, but I need to do a little more changes so that I don't repeat myself, as in I need to add few more GORM tags in the MeshSync struct, and I need to use similar messaging framework for the flushing MeshSync function which we have. So I just need to do a little more work over there. So other than that, it's still in work in progress. So any questions or feedback?
Yeah, we're still warning the user about the deletion, right? We're having them confirm the deletion.
Yeah, we do that.
Or rather, I guess, yeah, it's not, it's, when they choose to delete a Kubernetes context, which is to remove a connection, we, I think, provide them a modal that gives them a little bit of info to let them know that Meshery operator will be removed from the cluster. Meshery will disconnect. As a natural consequence, the MeshSync data, what you're doing is like, cleaning up what is otherwise the orphaned data from MeshSync. And so it's static, it stagnates pretty quickly anyway. So it certainly seems like the right thing to be doing, clearing it out.
Though we don't get a model, I wanted to share that we get this alert kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Can you try this for me? If you go to settings and invoke
for settings, we have that. Here we don't see that, but if we do it from this context menu, then we don't see that.
Yeah, I got you. And then if you check mark the row and do it, what do we? Boy, we got all kinds of things happening, don't we? We got like every single it would seem to me like a consistent use of a modal where we can describe as much as we want and where, people have to confirm or cancel, because actually the last and final way that someone can delete a cluster or this connection is the X on the chip there. What do we? Bingo. we got all the bases covered. Yeah, cool. So you know what to do. One request, if you don't mind, is if you were to check mark, if you were to get that modal displayed one more time for the operator, it'd be nice if the proceed was red.
Okay.
So, awesome.
I took these things into consideration and recommend changes.
Fantastic. So good. While you're, while I'm making wishes, while you're like, let me just pile it on. Unless other people on the call have a different suggestion, I might like the add cluster button has always just kind of looked strangely out of place for me. I don't know if there's a better positioning or not, but I figured I'd call it out just in case you have a better idea. Because when you look at the challenge here is if you look at like the designs page or the filters page that Sufyaan was looking at, I think I added an R to Sufyaan's name. I shouldn't have. But if you look on these pages, they conveniently have a table or a grid that takes up the vast majority of the page, and conveniently at the top they'll have like import, filter on catalog views or other action buttons, which I think, fits, and there's kind of a consistent UX. When you go into settings though, the add cluster only makes sense in context of the environment. And consequently, you only see that button, within the, okay, good. So maybe somebody else on the call has a better idea. Like to me, it still feels misplaced or miscolored, or, I don't know. Maybe not. Does anyone else feel like this, or is it just, do I just need to get used to it? No one else has even thought about it because which then means that, I just need to get used to it. Because
I think I can open an issue for this. Then we can see what other people have suggestions for.
Yeah. The delete cluster is kind of interesting. It's just that we're using color here for the button to indicate that, you should click it. And then anyway, on the delete trash can, we don't use a color. And so, we can talk about it on the issue.
Okay.
Thank you, Pranav. So next up we have Ashish or Abhi on subscription refactor.
Abhi, you can talk about it.
Yeah. So we already talked about this in the previous Wednesday call, and I don't think there is any more update on it. There is no more progress on the work done that day. So you can just go to the draft PL and see the current progress. But it's being delayed due to some other work that was more, prioritized. So I think this subscription refactor will be done this week. So after that, there will be something valid to discuss about here. So
Thank you, Abhi, for the quick update. So Ashish would like to take up the item, enforcing provider and the next issue.
Just give me a second. My system is heating up. Wait.
Sure.
And so after Ashish was Root Raj, and he's sick today. So
Yeah, just give me a second.
and
Actually, I have 2 clusters running around, so that's why I'm closing a bunch of tabs right now. You want to like a very short thing that they can go, or
yeah, Nishant has one on
like 1 minute.
Yeah, Nishant, do you want to speak to yours? Because I think it's fairly short.
Yeah, I can. Just a second. Yeah, I'll share my screen. Yeah, so a couple of, I think approximately 1 or 2 months back, we shifted from using our custom homebrew tab, that is Meshery / homebrew tab, to the homebrew core repository for publishing Meshery CTL releases. But we left the system in place that still publishes Meshery CTL releases to our custom tab. We did it because so that if there are any problems or like the homebrew core is incompatible with our release system, so we can still use our custom tab. But since it's been a lot of releases and a lot of time since we shifted there, and I personally don't think there are any problems with that. With using homebrew core as the main channel to publish Meshery CTL, we can like stop publishing Meshery CTL to our custom tab and add and also like anyone who is still who has installed Meshery CTL using our custom tab will still be able to update their Meshery CTL like did before, because we'll be adding a migrations.json file, which will tell homebrew that it like Meshery CTL has been shifted from this tab to the homebrew core tab, and whenever homebrew will be updating the Meshery CTL, which was installed from this tab, it will know that further updates are being published in the core tab. So yeah, I think we can replicate. What do other guys think? What do you all think? It should be like there are no problems with publishing Meshery CTL at 2 places, but it's just better if we have a single place.
All right, I'm compelled to chime in if others are. Yeah, Nishant, I think if others don't necessarily have an opinion, sometimes it's just because there's so much going on that they need a moment to digest or a little more context to kind of weigh the decision. The nice thing is that in this case, you're really close to this, and so I guess to summarize for everyone else, it used to be the case that we were using Go releaser to create the Meshery CTL binary, which is treated separate from the rest of the Meshery containers, the 10 or so Meshery containers. Those are treated through a different process. Well, the Go releaser is the way that it produces binaries and releases them is not compatible with the core way that Homebrew, as a popular package manager for Linux and Mac OS, it's not compatible with the way that they do their core releases. So when you go use a tool like Brew, very similar to Yum or apt-get, that a lot of times you can just do brew install the thing, kubectl or Docker, like the thing that you're looking for. And thanks to Nishant, that is true for Meshery CTL. It's just brew install Meshery CTL. And that's a really pleasant improvement from the prior instructions. First, you had to add our repo, like grab our tap, brew tap install something. Anyway, it's much more concise. It's official and so on. And Nishant has, I'm just repeating the same thing he said, which is we've been on this new system for 25 releases or something for a while. We hit a snag or two, as you might expect, but generally don't. And it seems to be working well. I mean, I'd say, Nishant, I think you should make the call. It has my support, but others might have an opinion. Ultimately, for my vote, I'll let you decide for my vote. And then if anybody else has an opinion. But they'll weigh in Slack. I'm just we're
Yeah,
right.
Okay. I'll make a pull request at the beginning, and if anyone has any comments, they can comment on Slack. I'll also add a comment that will list minor 1 or 2 cons of deprecating. So yeah.
Okay, so I'll go next. So the other thing was there was an open ask about enforcing a remote provider in certain deployment instances. So we would like to have this Meshery. We would like to have Meshery on play.meshery.io, and there unauthenticated endpoints. We don't want unauthenticated endpoints to be there. So this was a 2-part problem. I have the 2 changes that I've made. I'll quickly summarize. So right now we only have like one authentication mechanism, which is provider authentication, and the other endpoints which are like not under the authentication mechanism, they are completely so we don't use the auth middleware for those. So this PR creates introduces a consistency such that no matter what handler you add on whatever endpoint, you have to use the auth middleware. And then the second part comes, which is that we can extend this idea of provider authentication via this authentication mechanism enum. So you can have multiple authentication mechanism enums inside of the middleware. You can have your so the older logic would be like when you have your provider auth, and for certain endpoints you can enforce a no auth, and these authentication mechanisms will not be respected if you pass on the enforce provider flag with a particular provider. So while deploying your Meshery, if you say enforce provider remote or enforce provider local or whatever, you enforce a provider. Enforcing a provider would mean that no other authentication mechanism would be respected other than the provider authentication mechanism. And then even in that thing, we'll only allow the request for that provider. The one of the use case. So let me first demo it real quick. So right now I'm logged in as a remote provider, and I ran this command. Where is it? I guess it is in. Yeah, here. I ran it with my remote provider set to local, and I can't seem to. Yeah, this is the make file. So I ran it with make server remote provider, which basically means that I can only access all the endpoints which are authenticated by the remote provider. So like if I try to go on an unauthenticated endpoint, which was something like /API/component/Kubernetes, I'll just get a 401. And if I try to log out right now and log back in as none provider, I'll again get a 401. So basically no request is allowed other than the remote provider. So similarly, you can even enforce none provider, but I don't see a use case for that. But for remote provider, we have a use case. And what the reason for just not bypassing the auth completely and having this type authentication mechanisms is so that like in future we can have so adapters register their components to Meshery server via an endpoint, whether we cannot use the provider authentication mechanism, because that those are systems and not actual users. So for systems tomorrow, like we can have another authentication mechanism, some key value based, something like that. Not key value based, I mean that we create some secrets and all, and that change will be additive, or these are like a switch case case statement. So you'll have something like models dot that particular authentication mechanism, and you'll add the logic here, and then use whenever you basically while instantiating in the server.go, when you actually, so yeah, the file is big, so it's if I load the diff, so yeah, whenever you basically add your endpoint here, you'll have to explicitly pass now that which authentication mechanism you want. So right now most of these wants provider auth. This makes things a little bit readable, and whenever a new contributor comes in and whenever they add something, there is less chance they'll mess anything up, because they'll have to provide what authentication. They'll have to know that, okay, so if I'm providing provider auth, it means I'll be using session injector, so to have all the provider stuff. And if I'm using like if I'm using something like here no auth, it means these are endpoints which require no authentication. If I'm adding some, so basically to make these things a little more explicit, so authentication mechanisms and an overriding flag to enforce the provider authentication mechanism, and also a specific provider type. This will yeah, so that was my quick demo. Does anyone have any question regarding this?
Yeah, I'd love to see something in the Meshery architecture deck. There's a few different scenarios that need to be accounted for. What if someone wants to switch providers after deployment, or what are the, how do they do it? What happens when you add a third one? Can you have two enabled at the same time, or just,
Yeah, if you don't have info, okay.
Yeah, I actually don't want you to speak. The point is to write it down. It's like, yeah.
Okay.
But it's great. Seem good. And you're right. It's exactly the other part to write down as well. It'll drive some clarity. Like, and intentionally, these are unauthenticated, perpetually unauthenticated APIs. And here's why. And here's how that's good. And
I just wanted to point out that there is no regression issue. So current behavior plus extra behavior. So we will not be eliminating any of the current behavior. So if you're in the normal behavior, whatever it was, if you don't have that pass any flag, it's just the current behavior.
Yeah, thank you, Ashish. So since we are over time, we will discuss rest of the agenda items and topics in the next Meshery Dev call. So thank you all for joining today. I do encourage everyone to join the Meshery project office hours on KubeCon today, which will be 1 hour after this call. So do join us, everyone.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a good point. It's so in an hour we have the project office hour. I'm glad that you said that, because I thought it was in 2 hours. So perfect. Cool. Yeah, thanks a bunch, Gaurav. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.